Hey, what's up guys? This is Brad with Despite Fitness, and got a video today. I'm going to talk about how to squat for beginners. You guys have to forgive me. I have a bit of a head cold right now. I'm fighting through it. I'll do the best I can, but we'll see how this goes. Now, I wanted to develop this video, and I've been thinking about it for a little while now. And the idea for this is, how to squat for beginner lifters. This works for males, females, younger, older, whatever. I think that the advice that I have on here will be good for, well, pretty much everybody. First, before you begin squatting, obviously you got to make sure that you are of sufficient health to be able to squat. So chances are, if you're watching this video, you probably are. Otherwise, you wouldn't be interested. And the reason why I wanted to make this video is because how much information is out there and how many other videos of how to squat exist. And a lot of the videos have information that is superfluous, is not necessary. And a lot of the videos, if you kind of go through YouTube and you watch them, you realize that a lot of them have either bad or contradictory advice about how to perform the squat. And I kind of wanted to distill things down for a new lifter who maybe in watching some of these videos might be confused about all the information that's out there. And I also saw that there's a lot of information that, like I said, might not be necessary for someone to begin to squat in the first place. Stuff that you really shouldn't be concerned about at first. Versus just getting in and actually squatting. So what I did is I polled a few friends in a highly scientific and very organized text message to see kind of what they thought were some top ideas of how to squat, or the most important, most essential items on how to squat. And I was able to distill it down to 3 tips. And we're going to talk about those right now. Tip number 1 is it shouldn't hurt, right? It shouldn't hurt, no pain. In order to squat, or while you're squatting, you want to make sure that it doesn't hurt. And chances are, if you're watching this video, you probably know how to differentiate the good hurt from the bad hurt. But suffice to say, when you're going through and you're actually performing a squat, whether you're performing warm-up sets with just the bar, or you're getting up to your 1 rep max, performing that squat shouldn't hurt. The most that I've ever squatted is 749.5 pounds, and I would not say that doing that was comfortable, but it didn't hurt. And so that's an important, I think, distinction to make when it is you're squatting. So if in practicing your squat or getting in and squatting for the first time ever, you're doing it and you find that it actually hurts, sharp pain, something feels like it's tearing, or something feels like very pinpoint, very specific pain, that's probably a bad thing, and then you should stop and reassess what you're doing, talk to somebody, or get some hands-on advice at that point in time, and maybe they can help you figure out what it is that you're doing wrong. Number 2, stability. Now, stability as a tip or as a necessary item to squat came about from seeing a lot of different bits of advice about some mechanics and things that you needed to do while you squat. And there was 7 or 8 different bits of information that really kind of centered around stability. And so I wanted to distill that even further down to just one item. And so really, stability equals power, right? So if you have no stability or you have instability, you're not going to be as powerful as you could be. And so what do I mean by stability? Well, I'm talking about proper abdominal bracing. You can achieve that with a belt, weightlifting belt around your abdomen to give you that kinesthetic cue to push against it and create that nice tight core so that you can keep that your chest upright, and instead of falling over and folding over from the weight. It also encompasses knee position relative to feet. So while you're squatting, You don't want your knees to collapse inside of your feet. That'll put you at a high risk of injury, and also won't allow you to transfer power from the floor in through the bar sufficiently. And then distribution of weight, kind of where you put the weight on your feet. Do you more on your toe or more on your heel? You want to make sure that obviously you have some sense of balance and that you're able to appropriately distribute that weight. Also, some talking about bar placement on the back. Wherever it is that you choose to, or that you elect to hold the bar, you want to make sure that bar is stable. So creating a nice tight, upper back for that bar to rest on, so that you don't have any movement. Because essentially anything other than the joints that you intend on moving for, the particular movement, in this case squat, your hips and your knees to a large extent, everything else should be relatively immobile. You want to have everything nice and tight and in stable position, so that you don't bleed off any energy. In areas where you lack stability, you're going to have issues. And so just make sure that when you are squatting, you want to be tight and rigid. And then squatting through a full range of motion. Squatting through a full range of motion will give you proper muscular development. Will allow you to develop the musculature most appropriately, and obviously through that muscular development will allow you to build strength and power. So if you're unsure or not comfortable with performing a full squat, you can develop your ability to perform a squat through a full range of motion by implementing boxes of varying heights. Squatting ass to grass or squatting down below parallel for you is either difficult or seems intimidating. You can achieve a depth squat by squatting to a box and then just slowly but surely making that box lower and lower and lower until you get to a point where you're actually squatting below parallel. And guys, that's it. Those are my 3 tips: no pain, stability, and full range of motion. Now obviously I'm kind of cheating a bit with the stability tip, just because it really does encompass a lot of things. But I think for the beginner, instead of trying to give you a dozen or so different cues that you need to focus on, you just need to understand stability, and you need to try to create a nice tight body, and stay tight and stable through that entire range of motion, so that you can perform the squat to the best of your ability. And I think that if you just think stability and think to yourself, trying to keep everything from moving unnecessarily, that inadvertently you'll get that cue. And then you just kind of continue to watch yourself and assess and see if there's areas where you're giving up stability, and then fix those as you go, versus giving you a dozen different cues and setting you loose on the world, kind of overwhelmed and trying to focus on 10 different things at once, because that's probably not going to work either. Now, having gone through these couple of cues, the last bits of advice that I'll impart onto you is it's best to train with friends or a coach. That way, they can watch you and give feedback, give you some hands-on support if you're having some issues with your squat, versus trying to learn what it is you're doing wrong in a video, because videos aren't tailored specifically to John Smith of Idaho. They're just general guidelines and general bits of advice to try to help you out and give you some cues and different things to think about. So as a beginner, I think the important thing is to just perform the squat. What you're going to find is that everybody has an opinion. So if you perform a squat and you asked 100 different people what they thought of your squat, you're probably going to get 100 different opinions about what it is you should or shouldn't do, or how your squat actually looks. In the Army, there's we do a lot of dress uniform type stuff, and so the uniforms and how things need to be set up is very meticulous. And what I found in my time in the Army is that in the desire to be helpful and the desire to help a person, people will come up with just about anything. They'll throw out something, even if it isn't necessarily all that accurate in terms with the Army uniform. but then also with just, general stuff like, squat. So if you ask somebody to critique your squat, they probably have a desire to say something, and so in that they might just grab at a straw and throw something out there, whether or not they even know what they're talking about, or whether or not you actually did or didn't do that thing correctly. And then so with that, obviously, be wary of the advice you get. Don't necessarily accept everything from everybody. One of the catalysts for this video for me was I received some unsolicited advice from a female lifter about my squat, and I thought about the advice and considered it for a brief moment. But considering that she's not that good of a squatter, and she didn't really have any basis from which to speak, and had probably somewhere in the ballpark of 15 less years of experience than I do, I quickly discarded what it was she said to me. So just understand that just because somebody opens their mouth and they say something to you about what your squat is or is not, it may or may not actually end up applying. If you look at the top squatters across the world, and you break down and diagnose their movement patterns and what they do, you're probably going to see a wide variance of movement among those lifters, because everyone kind of develops their own style. And so just understand that you too are going to have to develop your own style. So the best way to do that is to just squat. And while you do that, record yourself. Make sure you record yourself squatting, so that you can critique yourself. You can look for areas of instability. You can look for areas of improvement. Record yourself from the front to make sure that you're staying balanced and symmetrical. Record yourself from the side and make sure that you're staying balanced and symmetrical. And look at yourself critically, and be willing to make the appropriate changes when they're appropriate. And then understand too that your style may change over the years. If I look back at some of my early years of squatting and powerlifting, my squat style was vastly different than what it is today. Some of that, or a large part of that, has to do with the fact that I used to compete in geared lifting, so single ply, multiply powerlifting, and now I don't. And so the styles between geared powerlifting and raw powerlifting is very, very different. So just understand too that depending on what it is you do, your squat style may be different from other people's, and that, like I said, it may change over time. Lastly, guys, just as just kind of as an aside for this, again, my whole purpose is just to help people figure out how to squat, give you a couple of things that you could focus on, and then just tell you just need to squat. Take the time, put in the hours, put in the time, and just squat. And over time, you'll get very, very comfortable with it, and over time you'll develop your own standard and style of squatting. And you don't necessarily need to pay attention to every video that comes out. You don't need to pay attention to every everybody that says something about butt wink or whatever. As long as it doesn't hurt, and as long as you can remain stable, you're probably going to be fine. Thinking about squatting and thinking about trying to get tips on how to squat is a lot like asking a home run hitter for the Major League Baseball, how they do it. And to a large extent, they may be able to give you a few tips of things that they do that help them be successful, but really, they probably couldn't even fully explain it to you. They don't know. They just do it because they've been hitting baseballs for the majority of their life. They just know how it feels. Same thing for squatting, is if you just get in there and you squat and you develop your style over years, you're just going to know what feels right. And I think that that's really the critical element to all of this, is just squat. It shouldn't hurt. You should stay stable, but you're going to know what feels right over time. And even if you don't up front, you'll learn. So with that, I hope the information helps. I hope it's simple enough to follow, and kind of avoid some of the pitfalls that I think other videos of how to squat have fallen into. That's all I got. If you have any questions or comments, or there's something that I didn't cover enough, leave me a question below. I'd love to respond. And like, share, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.